B-grade sci-fi movies always fall into one of two categories. They're either so bad they're good, or they're simply just so bad. The film we're going to have a look at in this episode of SciFi MineShaft unfortunately falls into the second of the two, although perhaps only just.
Now I know what you're all thinking. How could a film called Teenagers from Outer Space be anything but stellar? Well, you would be surprised. This B-grade sci-fi film from 1959's relatively terrible quality is perhaps not surprising, as it was created on a $14,000 budget and produced, written and directed all by one guy who also played a role in the film, who then, if Wikipedia is to be believed, went on to believe that he was Jesus Christ. Which is, honestly way more interesting than the film itself. However, this video is not a biography of the life of Tom Graeff, or however you pronounce his name, more's the pity. It is a review on Teenagers from Outer Space. So if you want to learn about Tom Graeff's life, you'll have to read up on it yourself. However, if you want to hear a review on Teenagers from Outer Space, you just have to keep watching this video. So what is the premise of Teenagers from Outer Space? Well, there's a group of teenagers who look like they're in their late 20s, early 30s, who have come to Earth with the intention of farming gargans, which are, in fact, just lobsters, but they get really big and very destructive, so if they are farmed on Earth, they will destroy all of humanity, which is not good for Earthlings, but is great for the aliens. I know, so far the premise sounds incredible. All the aliens agree that this is a great idea because they really like the taste of lobster, except for our main character, Derek, who doesn't think it's such a fab idea because he's just not that on board with genocide. And of course this leads to conflict, which leads to a film, because without conflict a film is hardly worth watching. And this entire premise is fine. I feel that this could have been used for a perfectly good B-grade sci-fi film. However, unfortunately, Tom Graeff, aka Jesus Christ, just couldn't quite pull it off. The film is plagued by terrible acting, terrible dialogue, and terrible pacing. All of these combined, but especially the terrible pacing, makes it not even qualify as being so bad it's good, because it just turns into a bit of a yawn fest. Quickly after arriving on Earth, the alien Thor, who is unfortunately not the Chris Hemsworth Thor we've grown to know and love, nor is he the Norse god Thor, he's just a teenager from outer space named Thor. Anyway, I digress. Quickly after arriving, Thor disintegrates a dog, because he's evil and that's what evil people do. This leads to the most tacked-on and forced exposition I've ever seen in the form of an argument between Thor and Derek. Derek argues that everything sucks and is terrible, and Thor strongly disagrees. All you really need to know from this exposition is that the space aliens are basically Nazis. They believe in the superior race, yada yada, books are banned, and they're happy to do genocide. It's all fairly unnecessary past the fact that they were willing to wipe out the human race to build a lobster farm. I feel like that had already accurately established them as bad guys, and the rest just drones on as white noise. Following the argument, Derek escapes. The aliens discover that Derek is the son of their leader, and the Gargan is hidden in a cave. Thor is then sent to find, apprehend, or kill Derek. And it's not until this point that it actually feels like the film starts as a movie, which is what I was talking about earlier about poor pacing. This section, which is almost entirely exposition, takes up the first 15 minutes of the film. The next act of the show, if I dare call it that, follows the main character Derek, who, by the way, looks quite a lot like Merlin from the hit disappointment TV series Merlin, as he gets confused by common Earth things. It's basically how Mork and Mindy would have turned out if Mork and Mindy had been completely humorless, badly acted, and overall terrible. Speaking of Derek, he is one of the major issues in this film. He is, as I said earlier, the main character, and his voice is just utterly terrible. He speaks every single line in the film, regardless of situation, with this annoying, monotone, nasally voice that could have put the Duracell bunny to sleep.
Would you tell me the meaning of the inscription on this metal piece?
Derek then goes into town with the intention of finding the owners of the disintegrated dog in order to tell them that their dog has been disintegrated. However, on arrival, he fails to do this, and instead the owners of the dog mistake him as looking to rent a room, and despite having no money, speaking with a strange monotone nasally voice, and being dressed in weird clothing, they give him a room for free until he can pay them back, which I find bizarre. Even though my memory of the 50s is a little bit hazy, if someone turned up on my door, talking weirdly and in a nasal voice, and dressed in a jumpsuit with duct tape on it, I would probably not respond with, "Hey, here's my pretty teenage daughter, come into my house and stay for free." But whatever, it was a different time. It's hard to judge the actions of people living in the 50s by post-older on society standards. Hashtag never forget. Also, not to hark on about this, but straight after he's arrived, they then give him clothes to wear and let him drive their car on the way to a pool party at their friend's house. So, very, very accommodating people in this film. Oh, by the way, by the time he finally decides to tell them that their dog is dead, their reactions are very, very non-human.
I found that among the remains.
You mean somebody killed Sparky?
That's where she said Sparky was killed by the guy.
Sparky, our dog? She didn't tell me about that.
Also, once more, Betty, the girl, the Mindy to Derek's Mork, decides to blatantly disregard the rules of stranger danger and asks him to show her to a dead dog. This is how Derek tells her that her dog is dead.
Sparky's dog tag. Oh, where on earth did you find it?
When I first arrived, I was with some others. One of them destroyed a small creature. Later, I found that among the remains.
If someone comes to your house and tells you that they were with some others who destroyed a small creature, you don't get in a car with them. You run for the hills. That's serial killer stuff right there. Once they arrive at the dead dog, we have some more exposition, followed by this romantic scene.
You may not understand, but I hope it will not make any difference between us, because
I don't care where you're from. I don't understand all this, but somehow I feel that I've always known you. That we've never been apart.
They've literally known each other for less than half an hour, in real time. What does he mean by, "I hope this doesn't change anything between us"? He's arrived, told her her dog is dead, and that's about bloody it. What is there between us? And she responds by saying she thinks she's always known him. If someone arrives at your house, tells you your dog is dead, you're not supposed to instantly fall deeply in love with them. It's not how it works. The love plot in this film is as rushed and unbelievable as that of Padme and Anakin's. In fact, possibly even more so. But whatever, let's move on. Who am I to judge a love plot written by Jesus Christ himself? Thor then continues to track him. There's a police shootout, Thor gets injured, then he gets not injured, and then there's more shooting out and chasing, yada yada yada. It goes back and forth for a while, and it's a bit hard to really keep your attention span with it so long when it's so convoluted and really quite slow. But then at the hour mark, the film pretty much changes in style completely. It becomes, well, basically a monster film, which is rather refreshing to be honest. The Gargan eats someone that went in the cave, and then gets bigger, and then goes on a right bloody rampage, and we get to see lots of people screaming and running away from the silhouette of a lobster, which, honestly, I quite enjoyed. We then get some more of the rushed love story between Betty and Derek.
you make me angry, but I like you very much.
Wow, with that line, it is almost like Padme and Anakin's relationship. Also, it's interesting to note that the character Betty is actually dating the character Joe, which is the one that's played by the director/producer/writer/messiah. So I'm not sure why he wrote a character to cheat on the character he's playing. I'm not a psychologist, but that's a little weird. And then finally, after quite a few people are eaten by the lobster, or crushed by the lobster, or whatever, it's almost entirely, if not entirely off screen, so you don't really know how the Gargan lobster is killing things, but you rest assured that it is. But after the lobster is defeated, we find out that the aliens are coming back. I'm not sure whether they're all teenagers. I'm pretty sure just the ones that came to Earth are teenagers from outer space, and the rest of the aliens are adults from outer space, or whatever. But it's not addressed, so it's probably not important. Anyway, they come back, and the leader, of course, is Derek's dad, who inexplicably trusts Derek despite the fact that he had been a traitor only moments earlier, and then Derek uses his newfound trust to destroy his people. And that's the end. Really, that's the end. The fleet is destroyed, and Derek along with it, and because of that we get this weird Lion King scene with Derek's head in the sky repeating a random line he said in the movie.
I shall make the earth my home, and I shall never leave it.
Is that you, Mufasa? What are you doing up there?
And that's all, folks. So, as I'm sure it's clear, this movie is not very good at all. But however, there are some good points in it that I have to give it credit for. Both of these good points are very cheesy, but they're sort of enjoyable if you're into B-grade sci-fi movies, which I am, so I enjoy it. But if you aren't into B-grade sci-fi movies, you probably won't agree with me on this point. The first of these two is The Gargan. People running away from giant silhouettes of a lobster is just fantastic. I really enjoyed it, I had a very good laugh from it, and it did everything it should have for a B-grade sci-fi movie. And the second of these two cheesy gems is The Skeleton Gun. If you watched my Lobster Man from Mars review, you would have seen me point out that they were parodying Teenagers from Outer Space with their skeleton gun. Well, this is Teenagers from Outer Space, so as I said in that review, this movie has a skeleton gun. The bad guy goes around with a child's toy-looking laser pistol, which when shot at someone turns them instantly into a skeleton. Well, that's probably technically not true. The person that's shot is already a skeleton, they've just got other stuff around that skeleton, and the gun removes everything except that. But either way, skeleton gun. It's hilarious, it's cheesy, and I love it. Unfortunately, these two elements of the film just aren't enough to redeem it. Its pacing is just too bad. And I think if the pacing was quicker, even the terrible dialogue and acting would have been forgivable, and it would have gone into the so bad it's good category. But as it stands, it is just so bad it's bad. Unfortunately for Teenagers from Outer Space, there are other B-grade sci-fi movies that are just more enjoyable. If you want to enjoy a good, bad monster film, there are plenty better options than Teenagers from Outer Space. And if you want to see an enjoyable film with skeleton guns, I suggest you watch Lobster Man from Mars instead. I don't suggest you watch this film unless you're really super into sci-fi like I am, and even then you'll probably have to zone out in a few scenes just to get through it. So in closing, if you are a super big sci-fi nerd, and you want to watch the film despite me telling you not to, I suggest you do so with a stiff drink in your hand.
Thanks for watching. I have been and still am Grim Grindle.